There's a massive difference between the different Savas, Cobalt, Miller and Emerald. It's difficult to track Connery because on prime time, the Savas won't reach anywhere near as much, and so there's big faction imbalances in terms of population count. Likewise, Soltek's like an alien planet, so we're not going to go over that here. There were some interesting things that I wanted to talk about. First, if we look at PS2 alerts, we can see that there's a very big difference between Cobalt, Miller and Emerald when we look at, say, Vanu being stronger on Cobalt and Emerald relative to Miller, but then on Miller we do have a bigger skill gap on NC, where they are actually a little bit more skilled. I've also noticed a massive amount of people playing in Prowlers on TR, and we can even see that in the numbers. Given that both these servers have pretty much the same population count, having a good 20% more kills on Cobalt, maybe even higher relative to a Miller, is insanely different. Also, on Emerald, obviously there's going to be way more primetime alerts, and so they're going to have more kills naturally. The other really marked difference between, especially in Cobalt and Miller, is the max usage overall. Especially on NC there are more maxes, but also even on TR there's way more maxes relative to on Cobalt as like a percentage of the overall player count. It's a massive server culture thing that I don't think a lot of people really have ever kind of talked about, and again, in the statistics you can definitely see that. Now, separately to all this as well, there are a lot of outfit differences. In the previous rendition of this video I tried to do a very small breakdown of a small amount of the outfits and compare them across different servers, but truth be told, man, there's 60 outfits on each server, and I can talk on Cobalt with a degree of authority simply because I'm coming up to 3 years playing on Cobalt before obviously my long hiatus. I played this game in beta, you could deploy galaxies and stuff, but yeah, comparing the outfits especially on Miller and Emerald between each other, it would be difficult. There's also nuances between public outfits, Discord outfits, mid fits which maybe don't let in as many new players, and then the skilled outfits which barely let in any new players. And then separately, of course, there's also outfits that like point holding, some that like to Zarg, there's some that really like to play in land vehicles, some that really like to play in air, and trying to compare those without, putting it in kind of like a spreadsheet form would be pretty difficult. So everything that I've said so far is objectively true. Things that you can measure, you can see in the numbers, and when you're playing the game, these differences are apparent to everyone pretty quickly. However, there's some server culture things that don't really fit into the numbers, like the levels of toxicity on different servers, the organizational level between Emerald and the EU servers, which is massive, and there's a few other differences which I really wanted to bite into, so let's quickly go over that now. All of the leadership within these different outfits are going to significantly affect the way that the outfit's kind of shaped statistically. For example, if you look at an outfit tracker and you compare Boys to Dig, which are both in the same faction just on different servers and have a similar player count, you'll see way different weapon kill statistics, and based on what the leaders are recommending, when you look at each of the weapons individually on each of those outfits. And I just wanted to show that as one example of many of how outfits individually and leaders really influence the kind of overarching server culture way more than people think. On top of this as well, there are also massive communication issues that I never see mentioned between Emerald, which has way more people on voice in public platoons relative to on Cobalt and Miller, where I do see some public platoon leaders talk, but oftentimes people will be sticking to themselves a lot more, and in public platoons you won't see as many people talking, relative to an Emerald which has orders of magnitude more people talking at once. It's crazy to see the difference, and you also see that in command chat as well. Command chat on, for example, Vanu on Emerald has a lot of people talking relative to I look on Cobalt Vanu. To be honest, I look at the other EU servers, the command chat isn't as lively, there isn't as many people talking, people stick to themselves more. And that isn't to say one's better than the other. There's an argument to be said that talking about and deliberating on decisions rather than just acting and moving fast, so there's benefits and disadvantages to having a lot of communication, but it is to say that Emerald definitely does have a significantly more soul to it, it's more vibrant, there's more people talking relative to on Cobalt and Miller. And that brings us into the next thing that I think is worth mentioning. We have on Cobalt, to be honest, a rather dead community. There isn't many people talking. A lot of that is because there's a lot of shit posters there, and so people just don't really talk to each other. There's a lot of animosity within Cobalt outfits, and that definitely varies from faction to faction, but it wouldn't be fair to say that that doesn't exist. When you jump on the Discords for Cobalt and the Discords for Miller, you see a very, very stark comparison of how alive the communities are, how much people are talking to each other. The difference is night and day. Fortunately, some of the Cobalt people which were creating a negative atmosphere have kind of moved ship over to Miller just because nobody's really talking in Cobalt. And we're starting to see that shift a little bit on Miller, but it's nowhere near as bad as Cobalt. On Emerald as well, the community is pretty alive, and that's worth mentioning too. And so the summary, the conclusion that I'm trying to build here over time is essentially there are people in the community which are either outspoken positively or negatively, can change things in a pretty unique way. There are massive shifts in the way that each of these factions on each of these servers perform, depending on how the leadership decides to do things. If suddenly outfits suddenly think, right, we really want to get air to ground control, and so we're going to pull a lot more air to air, you genuinely would that day see a massive difference in the culture of that faction moving forward if they were to encourage that kind of gameplay, lots of air to air on the map. And likewise, if you disincentivize air, you're going to see a lot less people pulling air because they kind of have been told, look, you shouldn't really pull air because there's too many skilled players on the other faction. They may as well just not even bother. And each of those scenarios, you know, they can have a massive difference on the meta, and that's something we don't really see in a lot of other games. I think this is unique to this game, to be honest. And again, the NC Max thing on Miller, you know, again, a really big difference that you see because the server culture there really is encouraging people to pull NC Maxes. I do also very quickly at the end here want to mention something that to me is pretty important that a lot of people often forget. This is a video game, it's for fun. You don't have to get mad at the opposition. Once the alert's over, nobody's going to remember who did well, who did bad. It's not particularly important. You don't need to get your jimmies rustled every time that something doesn't go your way, that I oftentimes see some people really fall into the trap of, whereas other people really do have an issue with just complaining too much and seeing the negative in everything. And so for those people that do kind of drag these servers in a negative direction or in a toxic direction, I just want to say, like, even selfishly, if you're trying to kind of bully your faction into doing well, instead that's very likely having the opposite effect, and people are most likely then just going to ignore you, mute you, and they're going to, out of spite, do the opposite thing of what you want, and that's just how humans are. Oh look, there's some people that will cower if you are negative, they'll kind of like fall in line, but a lot of people, especially other outfit leaders, they're not going to appreciate you being super negative. So think about that, you know, even pragmatically, if you do really care about winning, for whatever reason, it's just not conducive towards winning, getting angry all the time and creating a negative atmosphere. I'm sure people will still do it, but for those few maybe that will listen to me, I promise you'll see far better results if you just come from a collaborative mind and empathy, and also seeing the other ways in which people play the game and respecting it, and not trying to force everyone to play the way that you want them to. Especially because oftentimes you'll be wrong and not even realize it. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because subscribing does help so much. Like the video if you haven't already as well, so subscribe, like. I'm out, GG, bye bye.